Hi everyone, how are we doing? It is Wednesday here in Melbourne, and I am going to go and talk about, I'm not going to go, I am going to talk about the construction space, the infrastructure space in Australia, and some of the trends that are happening in Australia in terms of sustainability. But also, I wanted to share with you a really interesting site visit that I got to have last week for a really incredible, very sustainable build, actually two of them. So we'll get right into it. So if you are joining me live, make sure that you do say hello. I'm pretty sure, yes, I'm in all the places I need to be, which is great. But yeah, definitely say hello wherever you are. And, we'll get right into it. I guess for me, I've been in the buildings and construction, well, not so much construction, but specifically existing buildings and that kind of infrastructure space in terms of looking at efficiency, looking at optimization of the operation of the actual building, the actual infrastructure itself. So I'm kind of seeing this place evolve, this space really evolve. And as I kind of built onto my career, I did explore as well that sort of ESD space. So if you don't know what that is, it's ecological sustainable design. And so there are a lot of ESD consultants now around the market, and what they're really trying to do is design buildings that are much more thermodynamically stable, that are low embodied carbon, that are built to last, that are essentially passive in their flow of energy as well. So these ideas and concepts like passive house, it really isn't just a concept anymore. It's a well-established market. And so these sorts of ideas are what ESD consultants really focus on. And this space is definitely, it's been gaining traction for a long time. And what we're seeing is the sort of policy market, the policy legislation, the framework that's in place isn't yet fully supportive of more and more sustainable builds in Australia. So there is still a disconnect, unfortunately, but that's starting to change. We're starting to see that, the Property Council of Australia, Green Buildings Australia, they're starting to drive for more change in the policy space, and PCA as well. Property Council of Australia is starting to implement more of these changes. It's just a process. It's slow, as with any of these things. So some of the trends that are particularly key in the Australian market is that we're sort of in a corner now, where as a country we have made some strong commitments now to the Paris Agreement. We have put out sort of bigger commitments now around our renewable energy targets and so on. And so we're in a way back to the corner. We have to really step up and do what we said we're going to do to ensure that the infrastructure is fit for purpose and it's going to be able to withstand kind of the climate averse impacts as they go along. So that's one of the influencing drivers, I guess, for this space. The second thing is that we're actually seeing that there's a shortage in very important skill sets in the construction space, so engineering, and that's obviously causing a level of risk, an increase to the infrastructure space, the construction space. And so in terms of addressing that, there is a lot more drive for not just having all of the skills in-house within the construction business or the infrastructure development, but looking to collaborate with consultants in this space and looking to collaborate with niche consultancies who are already doing this sort of work. So, moving away from kind of just relying on having the skills in-house or leaning on kind of the bigger firms, to actually work with the smaller firms and really really lean into more collaboration. So that's another sort of driver in this market. Obviously, digital infrastructure is really transforming our market, and that's another major driver for this space, that people want smart buildings, like they want smart cities and smart transport and so on. They want smart buildings that are going to be able to tell them exactly what's going on in the building, what's going wrong where, and what we can do to kind of improve it. So kind of really perceptive analytics that will tell us, with foresight, what's going to happen, or with awareness and overview of what's currently happening in the building, that we can make sure that the air handling units are closing off when they need to, so they're not allowing air intake when they shouldn't be, and so on, and just improving that. That's a really basic example, but my point is that digital transformation or digital infrastructure is really important in the building space, to be able to have smarter buildings that can really work with us to improve the sustainability of the building, especially if it's a complex infrastructure. So not just buildings, but infrastructure in general. If it is complex, having that smart technology is really important in this space. And then, our cities are becoming quite dense, and that's happening all around the world. And so more and more people are needing to have a greater value home in terms of the value that they gain from it, but not at such a high cost. And so that's a really important one, because often when you move closer to the city, at least that's the case with Melbourne, it costs a lot more to live even in a tiny little apartment. But the apartment is not necessarily airtight or soundproof or well insulated or whatever it is, thermodynamically stable, and all of those issues that come along with the sort of standard build that is what most developers kind of go with, because it's quick, it's easy, it's what they've sort of always done, and going for kind of low cost, cheaper materials, and not necessarily prioritizing more sustainable, robust materials with that increased longevity. So really trying to transform the build into producing greater value for the clientele, but also not at a extreme, exorbitant cost. So that's a really big driver for this market at the moment. And really the fact that, there is that globalization happening, there needs to be an improvement to the infrastructure to kind of accommodate this rapid population growth and this rapid population movement as well, and shifting across and around the country and the world. And so that's a really big driver. And what we're seeing is that because governments, like even in Australia, we're leaning in on the investment of international investors. And so that's actually a problem, because if they're just buying these developments, or driving these developments for their own investment purposes, I don't know all of the details of why they do this, but oftentimes we're left with decommissioned or abandoned assets. So abandoned infrastructure, decommissioned infrastructure, and that's obviously really wasteful. I mean, it's really just built for some of their kind of financial purposes, which I'm not kind of that financial expert, and I haven't looked into this space very deeply, but I do know that it's causing a lot of abandonment and decommissioning of these builds that have obviously taken time, taken money to get to the point where they are, and then there's not been a lot of valuable use coming out of it. So it really is a clear problem, and definitely one of the things that is driving the way that this market is shaping up. So these ideas of, and I'm going to share my screen while I kind of talk through this, but these ideas of having greener buildings, following something like in Australia, we have Green Star, we have Neighbours, we also have ISCA, which is the Infrastructure Sustainability Council, ISCA, Infrastructure Council. There, so many acronyms, but we have those sort of schemes or bodies of thinking that are driving the sustainable infrastructure, sustainable buildings in Australia. But even around the world, we've got concepts like the Living Building Challenge, Passive House, WELL standards, LEED standards. So there are a lot of standards that are driving these, and LEED WELL is probably not as well established in Australia, but it's certainly gaining momentum. And I know that LEED is definitely has a lot of momentum really in Australia. So does Passive House. It's starting to kind of get your mental. So we're definitely starting to see these sorts of ideas of thinking starting to gain traction in Australia. And as a result, we're seeing developers, there are some developers out there who, if they're clever about it, they know that picking the kind of sustainable standards or the sustainable concepts of design, they're going to build a better building, for one, a low impact building, but also one that is going to have better resilience, longevity, probably lower costs in the longer term, definitely lower costs in the longer term, probably lower costs in the shorter term. So there's a lot of value for these developers, and that's why they're already taking to these sorts of concepts of thinking. And so what I wanted to say is, as a result of this this movement, the legislation has to catch up, right? And that's the kind of expectation of the future for Australia. So I wanted to just sort of share a couple of buildings that I got to visit last week, and that was with AMA, and that's Austin Maynard Architects. So I'm going to tag them in this comment because they don't know that I'm talking about this building, but I wanted to share this incredible work that they have been a part of, because I got to visit the building firsthand through sort of community work that I do with my local council. But more importantly, the building itself has just, if you see the awards against their name, it's just an incredible build that has been very consciously designed from the beginning. So Terrace House was actually the first kind of very sustainable, very passive house reliant building that they looked to design and did design and learnt a lot from that process, and then went on to then design and build Parklife, which is the other building that I got to visit. And what I really loved about these buildings, sorry, it's just loading. But what I really loved about these buildings, one, they're beautiful, they're very unique and pretty, but the fact that they are also very low cost. Cost is such a big factor for people, and it often hinders them from making any decisions on sustainability, because they think, well, if I'm going to buy sustainable, it's going to cost a lot more. But what Austin Maynard have really kind of disrupted with this build is they've made these buildings, and I'm not even kidding you, the apartments that they've created are absolutely stunning, for one. But this kind of apartment in this area, it's a inner city suburb, Brunswick, very hipster suburb in Melbourne, would normally cost around, I don't know, 2.5 million, I don't know, 1.5 to 2.5 million, right? And they've literally disrupted this entire kind of pricing model and gone anywhere from like 1/4 to 1/3 of the sort of standard price expectations. So they have created something that is absolutely affordable for people, but it is also extremely functional, because the entire building doesn't have any, each of the apartments don't have heating and cooling. There is just such a thermodynamically stable design with the way that they have designed their windows, their concrete slabbing in between each level, the way that they dry their clothes, even like everything that they've thought about has been very environmentally conscious. And I can't really even speak to all of the details. I wish I had more of kind of the knowledge in this space. But when I went into the building, when you think, oh, well, it's a pretty low cost offer for such a sustainable product, I wonder whether they have, shortchanged the clientele on say features and certain functionalities of the building and the apartments and so on. But when you walk in, it's really a really great place, and I would personally love to live there myself if I didn't have a dog and needed a bit of a garden space. But also I live near the beach, which I love, so I'm not complaining there. But what I wanted to say is this type of thinking, and the reason I'm sharing this with you guys is, one, is to just share an incredible experience I had, but also to highlight that sustainable thinking is actually really cost economic for clientele, for businesses. And this kind of example in the buildings sector in particular, it can be seen in lots of sectors. This is not anything unique, that sustainability is very much cost effective. It's very disruptive of our standard ways of thinking, and for good reason, because it's bringing value to the user, the stakeholders, the community. And so for me, it's just a no-brainer. This is the path we've got to go down, and this is the action that we've got to start taking. And a big part of that means having conversations, collaborating with more niche consultancies. It's not to say that working with a bigger firm isn't of value. It's just that when you're working with these niche consultancies, you're working more directly with the top leadership. You're getting the best, best in the industry, right in your doorstep, right in your office to help you as a business become more sustainable. So there is some really great trends that are seeing with a more green economy, with a more sustainable market. And what it means is there's a lot more equity and distribution, and everybody's getting a piece of the pie, and there's a lot of benefits to be had. So it's a really, it's a really exciting time. And as you can tell, I'm pretty excited by this. So I think if you are in Melbourne and you ever get a chance to kind of check out these buildings, definitely do. They're over in Brunswick. They're very beautiful. This photo of Terrace House actually doesn't even do it justice. They've put down the shutters to kind of highlight the fun little color scheme that they went with. But it's just an incredible build. And everything about it is, even to the level of kind of looking at community and social and human capital in the way that they design the building and how they allow people to connect with each other and interact as a community, a building community, is really, really fascinating. So anyways, it's wonderful to see such great examples of sustainability in the infrastructure sector, for one, but also just goes to show that this is applied to all sectors, that there is value to be had from sustainable thinking and sustainable design in any sector. So it's just a matter of opening up that conversation and collaborating and working together, being on this journey. So anyways, I could talk about this for hours, but I won't. I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. I appreciate those of you that joined me live, and I want to say thank you for your time. If you have any comments or thoughts, just share it in the comment section or reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Have an incredible day and take care. Bye.